a lot of people appear like they come to my retreats and they come to work with me. They're beautiful, they have money, they have a beautiful practice, and they're suicidal. And
Mm.
they don't understand these roots. And more, I see it when I work with them that it's about their family tree. There are issues with the ancestors, and then
Yeah.
and not to see it as connected. I feel like we've overlooked this in the Western world.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to your favorite podcast, Hi Vibing It. We are super excited to be back with you with another awesome episode, per usual, because we like to produce one every week for you guys to help you live your best life, raise your vibration, feel good, heal, be empowered, all those magical things. And today we have a very special guest on. Her name is Spring Washam. She is a teacher, a medicine woman, and a spiritual abolitionist. And today's conversation is going to be a juicy one. So hang in there, get ready for some wisdom and some hopefully practical advice on how we can heal as a society and move forward in the direction of compassion, love, and just being the change makers that we are. I know people listening to this podcast want to help usher in heaven on earth. And I believe that today's guest is really going to help us with that agenda. So, Spring, thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm so happy to join you both today.
Yes, we're excited. Lindsay,
Kelsey,
take it
did you
away.
even introduce us today?
No, I
Kelsey and
forgot.
Lindsay at your service.
Yes.
Podcasters extraordinaires. Spring, hi. I'm so happy to have you and talk to you. And this is very intriguing. I don't think we've ever had a spiritual abolitionist on before. And I am very excited to talk about that. But before we get into like the deep, what brought you, and this might be deep, but what brought you here? What is your, just tell us anything you want, as much or as little about your journey, what brings you to this work, and just kind of, yeah, your journey.
Yeah, that's always like a big
It
question, a
is,
big
isn't it?
answer, right? Like, where did this all begin? And then it's kind of like, where
Tell
do
us
I start?
everything.
Yeah. Well, I'll just kind of do some snapshots about how I got to this place. I think as a really young teenager, I got interested in psychology just because trauma, growing up with crazy parents and abandonment and poverty, all the issues that, that we have to overcome, some of us in this life. It kind of brought me to the point of really reflecting on suffering. Like, why is it like this? Why
Yeah.
are the people around me like this? What is this about? So that led me onto a path of psychology and then meditation. And when I was very young, I got involved in first self-realization fellowship with Paramahansa Yogananda, that whole community. And then that led me into going deeper into the Buddhist practices of Vipassana, insight meditation. And when I found that path, I really felt at home. And then to spend years practicing, years on retreats and traveling and going to Asia and coming back. And then that led to me becoming a teacher at a community called Spirit Rock Meditation Center in Marin and north of San Francisco. And opening a meditation community, being a founder of a big community in downtown Oakland. And that just led me, step by step, always really interested in how to heal, how to liberate the mind, freedom, consciousness. That led me into just working with plant medicine as I discovered new ways to heal trauma. That, so much of our work is about trauma these days.
Mm-hmm.
And that led me into creating another organization, blending Buddhism and plant medicine, working in the jungle in Peru, been doing that for 10 years, and then writing along the way. So just my own experiences. And so that's a short, that's a
I do
snippet.
I do have a nice kind of a question that I don't really ask a lot, but I really want to ask you and see what happens. Was there a point on your journey of, because it all sounds like, you know, as a teenager, I was just so interested, and same, by the way, we sound very similar. Like I was like, what makes our brains the way they are? Like, why are the people around me like this?
Mm.
why? And psychology, yeah, was definitely my first spark of interest. But on your journey, was there a moment where you thought, or maybe where you just doubted the path that you're on? Did you ever have a moment where it just felt too hard, too difficult? You were just maybe cracked open and you didn't really know what the next step would be or what next step to take. Was there a moment like that for you? And if so, how did you navigate through it? So I think that's where a lot of people get like stuck, you know?
I understand that. I can really relate to that. I think that it was really depression initially getting, and I think that's the place where a lot of people find themselves with this like feeling of hopelessness and despair,
Helplessness. Yeah.
helplessness, and not knowing what path is the right path. Where's the path to happiness? What's going to help me feel better? I think that's where a lot of people are right now. And that's what led me into deeper spiritual practices. That's what actually got me into meditation was this debilitating depression
Mm-hmm.
that I had when I was really young. And I've had periods after that of feeling depressed. I think that one was the hardest. That one was the kind of one where you question, do I want to live in this human body? Is this,
Yeah.
I think that's the question. Do I want to be here? How do I be here? What do I need? And so that actually is what led me into thinking I'm going to work with my mind. I want to understand consciousness. I always knew this was something I think about me. I always knew that the suffering had something to do with my mind. I
Ah,
always knew that it wasn't externalities, although I could point and go, it's my mother, it's my
yeah.
father. I was like, it's the way I think. I have a thinking problem. I just didn't know what that meant. I didn't have tools to work with my thoughts, consciously at that young age. But I always knew that if I could work with my mind, um, I could feel better, I could become better, and I would feel less suffering.
Oh, I
Mm.
love that answer. And I think you're absolutely right. Um, People will want to hear that and say, yeah, except in my situation, it's my parents, or except in my situation, like they're always going to find some exception. But I think if you can zoom out, everyone, lovely, beautiful listeners, zoom out and just wonder about that. What if I could transform a big part of my life, if not my whole life, by examining how I react to things, how I take things, and how I understand and perceive certain things, Very good question.
Exactly. And we are deeply impacted. It's not to negate the impact of our parents at
Yeah.
all. It's not to say that your stories or your trauma isn't real and isn't impactful. It's just at a certain stage, we recognize that it's the freedom is going to be our liberation, not theirs. Like
Yeah.
there, and there's a shift that happens between looking at them and going, wait a minute, because it's hopeless to trying to change my parents.
Yeah.
Oh my, I don't know about you, but
Yeah.
I'd be waiting for 20 lifetimes.
Oh, yeah.
So, but I know what I can change. And I think that's the shift is the power kind of comes back onto you and you think I have to work with my mind now directly. I can't try to fix that or want a better past.
Yep.
Right.
Beautiful.
It's like I can't change everything about my life in this moment, but I can change the way that I'm looking at it. I can change what I make things mean. I can change
Hmm.
like the significance that I'm assigning to these different things that are happening to me to turn it into something that is empowering. And I'm really resonating with your story because mine's very similar. Also, I grew up in Petaluma, which is in
So
in the
close.
area.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, at a young age, just hitting that rock bottom of like, need to figure out a way where I want to be here and I can actually enjoy my life because it's too hard and too heavy when you get stuck in these mind patterns of just no matter what's happening externally, you can get so stuck in this hole, like the mental hole. And I think it's really beautiful that we're just normalizing this experience for people because I think a
Yeah.
lot of people on the spiritual path maybe think that they're the only ones going through that or who have gone through it. And I think a lot of the path of awakening and becoming more enlightened and becoming more empowered first starts with experiencing the opposite, right? Feeling really disempowered, feeling really low, feeling confused, feeling sad. And yeah, just thanks for sharing
Yeah.
that. It's a really
Yeah.
beautiful story of
And I
transformation.
I think you were right when you said I don't remember exactly how you said it, but basically people are more willing to talk about, their trauma. Like people are talking about it, and in a way that we never were. I'm going to say in a way that personally, I never felt safe talking about. It's just not something you talk about. And I don't like a lot of trends on social media, but this is one I think I can get behind, where like, let's just all acknowledge that we got stuff. Everybody's got stuff. And I'm not saying to air out your dirty laundry on the internet, but what I am saying is we should have a certain level of empowerment to be able to share our story. If for no other reason than perhaps to help someone else, or to feel empowered in the way that you probably couldn't as a kid, or that you didn't as a kid, and that it's okay to discuss, it's okay to acknowledge, and it's okay to just be in that space of this is what happened. This is why I am who I am, and this is how I got here. I think it's
Yeah.
very important.
And I think that, one of the traps about talking about trauma is not talking about solutions and healing
Right.
modalities. Before, when
Right.
I was growing up, the dirty laundry was like Jerry Springer show and these crazy talk shows.
Maury
There was
Povich.
never, yeah, there was never like the steps. It was
Yes.
just like aired, right? And everyone's like, and then the show ends.
Yeah. We
This is
feed on the
hopeless.
toxicity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're like,
Yeah.
well, what good is talking about? Now we actually know more about trauma. We understand the mind body connection. We understand, hey, these are ways that we can work with it. So now there's more strategies,
Yes.
and there's more ability to actually tackle it. Before it was just, yeah, here it
Yeah.
is.
There's so much more support. Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. Beautiful.
I really
Well,
want to talk about your new book.
yes. Let's talk about her new book.
Yes.
I'm very curious. So, for anyone who doesn't know, her new book is called The Spirit of Harriet Tubman, which I have not read yet. I just learned about it today when I was researching you. But it
No worries.
sounds really cool. And I'm curious, like, did Harriet Tubman, do you consider her like one of your spirit guides? Was she coming to you in visions? Like, what inspired you to write this book and spread her medicine?
Yeah, I mean, it was a whole different experience when Harriet Tubman kind of appeared. And I tell the whole story in these 12 chapters. So I'm so excited. If you get a chance to read it, you'll see like I lay out. I was not obsessed about Harriet Tubman before this. I wasn't like, I mean, I loved Harriet Tubman. Who doesn't? You hear the story, you're like, oh my God, this is like someone who's, worthy of a lot of respect and admiration and a great historical figure. But it came about in 2020, in the summer of 2020, when
Ooh, what a
everything,
year.
oh my God. And that
Mwah,
summer of
vintage.
2020 was like the crack in the foundation of reality. It was the
Yep.
matrix exploded. And it was in that moment where Harriet kind of flew in and then became kind of like I'll say an ally ancestor
Mm,
wanted to share more about their story, more about their heart. There's a lot of historical books written, and Harriet was like, I don't need historical books. I need the book about my spirit. So hence the spirit of Harriet Tubman awakening from the underground and just this energy of Harriet awakening. Um, and I believe that Harriet Tubman is awakening right now because she represents our United States and around the world. There's a certain kind of racialized suffering, right? Let's
yeah.
just own that. And she kind of is a unique medicine balm for that particular stream. And I feel like she's coming back to just help, right? There's battles looming, and they're growing, and it's like, wow, who can we get support and guidance? Who's been there before? Well, this
Yeah.
ancestor, and I believe I like to describe it more of a conversation with an ancestor, who, by the way, is not just my ancestor. She's yours. She's
Right.
everyone's ancestor. She's primordial ancestor.
I
Um,
like that you say ally ancestor. That's just, mwah, it's awesome. It's a beautiful term for that. And I
yeah,
agree. I think that it doesn't have to be our ancestors in particular, especially those like, I don't know a better word than to say like a totem ancestor, like a quintessential
yes,
representation of this idea of weaponized racism medicine, right? That uh anti-weapon or whatever, that kind of energy should belong to everyone who lives here and has skin in the game. And I think it's beautiful that you say that. Like, if that's the journey that we claim, like, yeah, she's here to help. And I think that's beautiful. Can we just talk about, for people who don't know, so like Harriet Tubman just like came to you, just appeared to you and was like, hey, I need you to say some stuff. Is that what happened?
Kind of. I'm still, first
Because
of
this
all,
is
I'm still
fascinating.
processing the story, the book, the whole thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't anything that I had anticipated
Yeah.
writing. I've written one book. I was in the middle of writing another book about shamanism and healing and trauma. And then what happened was, it was during May of 2020, and she came first in a very powerful, like visionary dream. And I was running and I was being chased, and then I was
Oh my God, goosebumps everywhere.
my
Woo.
hands were burning and I was like holding on to something and I was like, what's going on? And I could feel the danger. And the next thing I know, I realized I'm hanging onto the back of Harriet Tubman's dress. And we're running. And that's the first chapter. This is how the whole thing started. I'm running. And I remember this whole episode. And after that, when I woke up, Harriet started coming in my consciousness all the time, and visions of her would appear in my mind while I was asleep and when I was waking. And I started playing gospel music, and I would feel her walking with me. And there was a lot around hands. It was like
Mm.
touching my hands, and now I've
Yeah, you
been,
mentioned your hands were burning in the dream. Like,
yeah,
that's
burning,
mm-hmm.
and there was a lot of holding hands and feeling her touching me. And I've been, obviously, I know we live in a multi-dimensional universe. I've been working with plant medicine, leading ceremonies for 12, 13 years. I'm not unfamiliar.
Yes.
But this was the first time there was like a crossover. This is the first time it was like, oh my God, wait, something's happening beyond the normal, and then after that it became, I put out a 5-week course, because remember at that time everybody was putting their work on Zoom. So I go, well,
Yep.
I'll just put out a 5-week class. Maybe somebody else is feeling Harriet Tubman. So I literally just put a little thing to my mailing list, and I had hundreds of people. The event went viral. And how the book happened was that while I was teaching this 5-week class in those sea of Zoom faces, when you have hundreds of people on a Zoom, my publisher had joined the class, the vice president of Hay House, saw me teaching secretly, in a way, was on the
Yeah.
5-week course, and
Just
then
kind of
after,
lurking, looking at
was
you,
just
watching
there,
you. Uh-huh.
learning and being there. And then it was like, you have to write a book. So that's how, I never had an intention. I never was like, oh, I'm going to write a book about Harriet Tubman. It didn't even occur to me until the series of events began to unfold.
This sounds awesome. Wow. Okay. So yeah, I wonder what that is about the hands, and like maybe she, or maybe you are, what is that called? Claire,
Sentient.
is that with the touch?
That's what they call it.
Claire
Mm.
kinesthetic, like Claire physical, but where you kind of receive the information through that sense, the texture sense, instead of like smell or sight or hearing, because some people hear voices. Did you
Yeah,
ever
it
hear
was
a voice?
all of that. It was
It
the
was all of it.
whole book is about the whole journey of
Oh
all
my
of
gosh,
that.
I cannot
And
wait to read this.
and it was like, this is how it happened. I tried to be very accurate. Like, this wasn't, this is what unfolded. This is what, and so it's
Yeah.
kind of mapped out,
Does
as
she
Cool.
best I can
still
tell it.
kind of hang out with you?
Yeah, it's there. I think when we have a specific task, that I think Harriet and I kind of merged a little
Mm,
bit, our energies merged. So when I'm doing an interview, when I'm teaching a class or something like that about it, I notice I start getting really hot and I'll start
nice.
to tingle, like I'll feel the energy of it. But I'm still, again, learning and integrating. For me, I was like, the book was one piece, but for the rest of my life, I'll be talking about Harriet Tubman
Uh-huh.
and the spirit of Harriet Tubman in some way. So I'm also like, it's a soul contract
Yeah.
that I never anticipated. Not this kind, with this particular ancestor, but
Maybe not as a human, but in your soul form, you were like, all right, me and you, Harriet, let's go.
obviously that's what
Let's
I
go.
write. Yeah, she was like, you agreed to this a long time
Yeah.
ago, and now the
And
time is.
it sounds like you were the perfect person at, to do this with her. So that is, or, for her to do this with you, it just sounds like a match made in heaven, literally.
Well, I questioned that for a long time and tried to get out of it
Yeah, of
because I was
course.
like,
Yeah.
maybe you need a historian. This
Yeah.
is crazy. I'm Buddhist. I'm like
Yeah.
I lead shamanic retreat. I didn't feel like the fit for it. I was like,
Yeah.
you need to call these other, real historians. I dropped out of college. I'm not, no, no, no. I tried to get out of it, but you could imagine that you have a contract at some
You're in it
point you
now.
have to deliver on what you agreed.
Yeah,
So,
and clearly people are loving the delivery, and it's exactly what the world needs, especially here, especially in where we live in this country, I think.
well, it's a certain kind of suffering that we're all being with, constantly bombarded by images of police murdering people and statements, and it's painful. It's hard to even fully turn toward. I mean,
Yeah.
for a lot of us, where it's just a background noise, but that noise is going to get louder again. That's my feeling. And how do we deal with it? How do we deal with that? And so it's
Yeah.
intense. Um,
So
yeah.
how do we deal with that? Now that you've been working with Harriet
Harriet,
for
come hang
some
out with us.
time, what
Well,
what do you feel like are
yeah.
her main like solutions,
Yeah.
messages, new ways, or maybe not new ways, but natural ways of operating where we can start to move as a society more towards love, compassion, understanding?
Yeah, and this is what's really hard, about people on the spiritual path because I've run into different types of people. I run into people, with like in the Buddhist tradition, they talk about, you know, two realities. There's ultimate truth, which we're all made of stars. We're all interconnected. We're star seeds. And then there's the other level, which is like the karmic level, the
Mm.
relative level that we also, everything matters. It's like nothing matters and then everything matters. And we're holding these polarities. And so on one level, we don't recognize the ultimate reality that we're interconnected and we're brothers and sisters and that we're here. We some people just want to focus on that level, right? Why are we talking about any of this? This doesn't even it doesn't exist. Well, it
It's not
does.
real. It's all a
It's not.
video game. Yeah, I hate when
Yeah,
people say that.
who cares about the polar bears? It's a dream, right? And
Yeah.
and then but there is a lack of compassion and a
Yeah.
real awareness because like both are true, the ultimate and this relative level where we have names and bodies and colors and so we have to
Mm.
somehow reconcile both on the spiritual path, and that's challenging. And some people get too much in the relative level and they just battle it out and they don't see, hey, honey, we're also made of stars. Let go, right? Both have to be in balance. So I always like to start the conversation with honoring the two truths that are simultaneously what we're holding. One could even refer to them as parallel realities. That's another, I think, way we could talk about it. But I think the book in itself is extremely hopeful. It's like,
Thank God.
yeah, it's very hopeful and it's also intense. That's the feedback I've been getting for some people who don't know history.
Mm-hmm.
It's intense to actually come to grips with what has happened in the country. Harriet was born into slavery, a system that was fully sanctioned, and that's hard. And a lot of people right now, they don't want to go past into the past because it's painful.
Yeah.
And there is something that Harriet's inviting us into like, hey, this is my life. If you want to understand my spirit, you must understand what happened to my grandmother who was you know, who was a part of being brought from Africa. You have to understand she was sold into slavery. You have to understand my grandmother. To get my spirit, you got to do this kind of work. And that's not easy. But it's in the spirit of liberation.
Mm.
None of us want to do our work, but you got to go deep in order to move
Yeah.
forward. You got to understand how we got here in order to be a healing agent, right? A lot of people go, "What? Why is everyone talking about all this? I don't understand. Why are people upset?" It's like, well, let's talk about what led up to this. Isn't that so common? Like in a
Mhm.
family situation, right? We mimic the family. It's like, why is everybody mad? Well, look what happened to our grandmother. And like, we have to be
Yeah.
willing. to do some of that work. So the book is like Harriet's life takes us on this journey, and through her, we learn about more of history, and that could help us be more compassionate, and also tips on how to be an agent of change, how to be
Mm.
a support to healing the wound. And we all have a part to play in it, even if we don't believe that we do. You know, we all have a connection. We all have something as being American citizens, as being global citizens. We could ignore it, but if we're healers, why?
Yeah.
You
I
know?
think one of the biggest things that we need to be able to be more compassionate is just to stop being so automatic, in family systems and in history. I think we've become accustomed to things and we've stopped asking why we do things the way we do. Why does my thought pattern automatically go to this when I see this on the news? Why do I, and I'm just asking more questions. Why do I act this way? Why do I think this way? Well, because my grandparents probably thought that. Okay, well, why? Like, once you ask certain questions, you don't even have to get that deep to know it makes zero sense. Some of the stuff that we just kept doing over generations because it was the norm and it was accepted, and I no longer accept. And I think if a lot of us no longer just accept what is automatic and what may feel automatic to us, it just, once you realize it makes no sense, it's easier to be like, oh, okay, well, let's do things a little different, maybe.
Yeah, and I think some of the encouragement here is also to open to people's own ancestry, to know where
Hmm.
your people are from. For me as a healer,
Now we're
I see
talking.
this as the biggest issue a lot of people have. That is, I just wrote an article for Health and Spirituality magazine about healing our ancestral lineage,
Mm.
because a lot of people appear like they come to my retreats and they come to work with me. They're beautiful, they have money, they have a beautiful practice, and they're suicidal. And
Mm.
they don't understand these roots. And more, I see it when I work with them, that it's about their family tree. There are issues with the ancestors, and then,
Yeah.
and not to see it as connected. I feel like we've overlooked this in the Western world, because
Yeah.
in indigenous culture, we are who we are because our great grandmother,
Right.
and we don't see a lineage connection in our culture. We just like, I appear here, it doesn't really matter, right? I'm like,
I sprouted out of the
no.
ground.
Yeah, like you're part of a thread, a
Yeah.
tapestry.
Since
And
the beginning, like, this is what we
yes,
forget. Like, you didn't just come in the 2000s. You weren't just born in, like, for me, 1985. Were you have DNA from thousands of years ago, still hundreds of years ago at the very least. Like, you have people. First of all,
right.
I'm a genealogist, so this is my,
Ah, that's your thing.
we're talking now. But yeah, absolutely, I think it's incredibly important. People that maybe have had zero interest in the past, once they find out a little bit about their story, it just changes everything for them.
And there is this huge, passion. Everybody, I don't know anybody who hasn't done one or two DNA tests
Right.
in the last 2 years on Ancestry. Everyone's like, "Oh, I'm from here." Well, but
Yeah.
we don't go a step further with that. Like,
Mm.
for me, I think it's important. I always ask people, "Where are your people from? Where
Yeah.
did they die? Where were they buried?" You
Yeah.
need to know this, whether it's Ireland, Ghana, India, or
Or
North
all of the above.
Carolina. Yeah, it's like you need to know this, because your ancestors are alive in you.
Yeah.
And so we need to know this. So there is a connection around Harriet Tubman being an ancestor, and her encouraging people. Your ancestors are listening every second, just so you know that. There's like a part where she's like, every moment, every prayer, they're here, every word, although you may not realize it. So, how does genealogy cross into our spiritual path? And how do we start to understand this information that affects our mental health?
Yeah.
So this is a big piece that I work with people. And once we start doing the ancestor work, their energy clears. Suddenly feel like, I'm happy. Okay, old debts are paid, right? We
Yeah.
put these bones to rest finally,
Yeah.
and I'm like, we have to do that. Everybody says, well, why me? It's like, because you're
Everybody.
here, an awake
You're not the
one.
only one.
You're the conscious
I
one,
don't know if you
right?
want to hear this, but you chose it. Like, you picked this family when you came here. You chose this. So let's go.
But how to put that in a way that people understand as part of their spiritual work,
Yes.
and a lot of people say that. I meet people. Have you ever met people who say, I feel like I'm doing work, but it's not mine?
Mhm.
Yeah.
All the time we hear this, right? I'm doing this stuff, but it's not my energy, it's my mother's. Well, that's part of this ancestor piece. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. you
Cycle
know?
breakers. And what helped me, because I've always been interested in family tree stuff, I've always been interested in genealogy and also uh the soul, like the lives of the soul, the soul's
Yeah.
journey. And I had a big struggle for a while of like, well, okay, so what am I then? Am I soul or am I DNA? Because I know that things travel through DNA, but how do I reconcile that with the fact that like I am a an amalgamation of every experience my soul has had and okay, all of the losses and triumphs and challenges and successes and pain and beauty that my ancestors have gone through. And it's just, it kind of breaks your brain a little bit, but it's also very beautiful to know like you are a mix of all of it. And you are, if you're listening to this, you're probably a cycle breaker. I'm just going to put it out there. So it's just, it is what it
Yes.
is.
And all chains can be broken.
Yeah.
Harriet Tubman said that many times throughout this
That's
talk. All
beautiful.
chains can be broken of oppression. And um and there's just something really important, that I want to start teaching through this work about healing our ancestors. And once I think people understand their own ancestral lineage, it gives them more compassion for other people naturally.
Yeah.
Oh, you're from the Philippines. Oh, you're from here. Oh, there's less a sense of separation, and it becomes like, I don't know, there's something about doing that work on a deep level that changes your heart. You see the interconnection. You
Yeah.
see that we're all trying to evolve. We all have this stream in us. And I think DNA isn't it, it just is an expression of this, right? Of the soul. It's like a physical expression of the soul's markers,
Yep.
switches on, switches off. We know we can change it. Epigenetics, we can
Oh,
turn
I love
off
this
and turn
guest. Oh
on,
my gosh.
things. And this is what I'm really about
Yeah.
is, and that's why on the cover of my book, on the top of Harriet Tubman's head is a DNA spiral.
Mhm.
It's like that's what this work is about, is putting these things to rest, and this heals our DNA. If we can make this movement happen, we're not passing this on to future generations.
Hey there. We hope you're enjoying this episode so far, but if you want to listen to the whole thing, we're going to invite you over to our podcast. Either search for High Vibing It on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you guys listen to podcasts, or even better, if you want to watch the extended video version of this episode that's even longer than the actual podcast itself, head over to our Patreon at patreon.com/highvibe. Lindsay, tell them what's awesome about the Patreon.
Patreon is where we have all of our extended episodes. As Kelsey said, we have it on video, so you can actually see the things that we're talking about. Sometimes we have visual visual aids, and it's nice to know what we're talking about. We also have hangouts that we do sometimes that are exclusive to Patreon people. And you can get started with all of this and bonus content and everything that we have only for the Patreon people for as little as $3. I think it's $3.33 a month. And that's it. And you guys can get all the benefits and all access to everything that we put in there. Really
Yeah.
cool.
It's really cool, really fun, super easy to join. And you guys don't even have to do that to finish this episode. If you're like, screw it, I don't want to pay any money, I just want to hear the rest of this episode, go to our podcast, High Vibin' It, search for it wherever you listen. It's totally free. Either way, enjoy the rest of the show wherever you choose to enjoy it. And we will see you guys next week because we do a new one every week. Adios.
Bye.